Hi, everybody. Welcome to Facebook Live and my conversation with Robert Dugoni about the world played chess. You and I have so much in common. And this book really sort of struck me in that way. So I see we almost have the same office, first of all.
Yeah.
We're both lawyer turned writers, both Seattle based, and both sort of, in some ways, expanding what we're writing in the last couple of years into some other areas. I mean, you've done, got this fabulous book, The Eighth Sister and the Extraordinary Life of Sam Hyle.
Hell.
Is that how you say it? Hell, okay.
Yep. Sam
And then The
Hell.
World Played Chess. And so I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Well, as I said off camera, this is really a big thrill for me, and without being too much of a fanboy, let me just say that I really, really have come to enjoy your books. The Nightingale to me is probably one of my top 5 books of all time, and I don't know if you remember it or not, but I actually emailed you and said, Kristin, where did you find this story? And I use your response in the classes I teach writers. And the response was, sometimes great stories just fall in our laps, and our job as writers is to get out of the way. And I just thought that was really wonderful. And then I read The Great Alone, and wow, I mean, that just blew me away. Especially given what we're going to talk about today. It was so real. The Vietnam veteran Ernst in that book was so real. So I'm a fan, but my wife is a bigger fan. So she's got the 4 wins right now, and I'll get it after her.
Well, thank you. I mean, that was one of the things I found so interesting about reading The World Played Chess. It felt so familiar to me in the sense that I graduated high school a year before this book was set. And it was really interesting to me because it's so real. I mean, this book just feels very anchored in the era. And yet it's not just, this young man who is coming of age who meets a Vietnam vet during his high school years. It's really about becoming a man and growing up and making the kind of choices that you don't really understand you have to make until you've made them. And I loved these 3 sort of timelines, viewpoints. It's a very complicated book. And so I'm just wondering, what was the inspiration for you? What made you set out to write this story this way?
Well, you and I are probably similar also in respect that I don't know that I ever set out to write any particular book in any particular way. After The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell, I grew up reading these books. My mother was an English teacher before she started having 10 children. And my mom used to hand me books all the time because I'd be bored. And the book she would hand me would be The Count of Monte Cristo, The Old Man and the Sea, The Great Gatsby. And that's what I grew up reading, books about lives lived. And so I always thought that that's what I would write. But, as we get older and we try to break into this business, we pick kind of the path that seems to be the path of least resistance. And for me, it was writing legal thrillers, which is where I really got my start. But as you mentioned, I sort of began to branch out and began to do some other things. I moved on to a police procedural with the Tracy Crosswhite series, which really sort of put me on the map. But in the back of my mind, I always had this idea that there were these stories I was going to tell about lives lived. And the first one that really came to me, and it came to me in a burst. And I, like I said, I remember what you said about getting out of the way of the story. And when Sam Hell hit me, I just had to get out of the way and let Sam tell his story. And then when that was done, I thought to myself, that I'd like to write another book like that. And then I hemmed and I hawed and I kicked around about 4 million ideas over about 3 months. And then again, suddenly it hit me. And it was like, why don't you tell the story of 1979? Why don't you tell the story about when, you got a job working on a construction crew with 2 Vietnam veterans? And I sat there and I said to myself, is there a story there? And the more I thought about it, the more I began to realize that was the summer. I think for a lot of us, that is the
Mhm.
summer
Yeah.
where we stop being kids because we have to. We're going to go off to college, or we're going to go off in the working world, or we're going to go off to war. And our parents aren't going to be there to hold our hands. We have to go off, and we have to grow up. And I lived in a bubble. I lived in a beautiful, beautiful bubble. Burlingame, California was sort of this blue collar, middle class neighborhood. I had 9 brothers and sisters. It was just, it was wonderful. I grew up crossing the street so I could watch The Wizard of Oz in color because we didn't have a color television. So we'd go to the neighbor's house, and there'd be popcorn, and it was sweet. It was nice. It was wonderful. And I got on this construction crew, and I realized not everybody lived in that bubble.
Mhm.
And some people had their bubbles torn away from them at a very young age. And the 2 guys I worked with, one became a mentor to me, who really helped me pay for my way through Stanford University by always having work for me. They were 2 Vietnam vets. One was a Marine, one was in the Army. And, they didn't talk a lot. Most Vietnam vets don't talk about their experiences a lot. But we would sit after work and we would drink beer, or we'd go out and they'd take me with them and they'd get me into the bar and we'd have a beer or two. And I mean, I loved it as a kid. They'd start to tell the stories, and they were horrific.
Mhm.
Uh, so when I began to put this book together, as you talk about, I had all these different ideas. And I actually had my son, because I felt I was going to be stealing some of his life with respect to his football in high school. And I said, will you read this for me and let me know what you think? And it was my son, Joe, who came to me and he said, you know what I think would be really powerful, Dad? I think it would be really powerful if you could tell William's story in Vietnam. And I thought, wow, that was profound.
Mhm.
And then I had that problem that we all have, which is I didn't serve in Vietnam.
Mhm.
So what do I do? And that's when it all started, where I just began to read. I read probably 12 or 15 firsthand accounts. I had always been fascinated by Vietnam. When I was in high school, there was a book that came out called Nam, and I'm drawing a blank now, but it's Mark. It'll come to me. Um, and I read that book because it was firsthand accounts of young men and some women who had been in the bush and what it was like. And so I still have that book. I still have that first edition, and I pulled that off the shelf, and then I started pulling off more, and I started buying more. And then I have a good friend that was a gunny sergeant in Vietnam, and Bob began to then provide me with marine materials from that era and from that place. And it was a lot of work, but
Mhm.
but it was well worth it, because I felt if I was going to tell the story, I needed to tell it honestly, to honor the men and women that truly lived it.
Well, one of the things that strikes me, because I've done, Vietnam a couple times, I'm sort of a war junkie, obviously, in terms of my interest level. And I think part of the reason for that is I mean, so you and I were both like, 12, 13 when this was going on. And, I was wearing a POW bracelet, for my best friend's father who never came home. And we really saw up close and personal, watching the news stories at night and then seeing how they were treated when they came home. And I know for me, that had a very lasting effect. And it's something that I think still needs to address. We still need to address how we treat our veterans when they come home. And so I loved that whole Vietnam section of the book was just fabulous and interesting. And I loved the character of William. But it's interesting in hearing you talk. Now I understand why the rest of it felt so real. I knew that the 1979 portion felt real because we lived that.
Yeah, we did.
I remember what it was like going to those parties, and everybody realizes in your small town that you're going different ways. And you've all been so connected for so long, but everybody now has different dreams. And for me, growing up in a very small town, my dreams were very different from everybody else's. And then you also sort of layer in the parent of that senior year of high school, which I wrote a book about years ago called Night Road, because that year is, I think one of your most seminal moments as a parent. You are suddenly dealing with big stakes drama. They're drinking, they're driving,
Yeah.
everything matters to them so much. And you really sort of showed us a marriage trying to figure out how to let the kids be free and yet be safe at the same time. And that's an incredibly difficult, sort of road to walk. And then you juxtapose it with William's story and the 18-year-olds going off to war, and
Yeah.
sort of, I just found that fascinating.
Well, thanks. You know what? It's what you said is so true. And people often ask me, how come most authors don't get published until they're in their 30s and 40s? And I said, I honestly think it's because you really don't start to live until you get into your 30s and 40s, and to have that perspective on what it's like. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I told my son Joe or my daughter Catherine, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, but I've never raised a child before. This is my first time, and I'm doing the best that I can. The number of times I've said to them, no, you can't do that. And they'd say, why? And I'd say, because I did it. And
Mhm.
I can tell you that no good will come from it. Nothing good happens after midnight is something that I have said to them repeatedly. And, I've been blessed to have two really, really smart, intuitive, uh, responsible kids. And but you have to live it. You have to live through it. You have to understand it. And as you mentioned, there's a big difference that so many of us have found, whether you come from a big town or a small town or all those things. And the other thing I really appreciated in The Great Alone was it's a very difficult book. It's a very difficult book to read, but it's supposed to be, because it was a very difficult experience what these
Mhm.
young men and some young women went through, and it would not do them service to not tell it honestly, how it really happened and how it really changed them. So you take this kid that grows up in this bubble, and you suddenly stick him on a workforce with two other guys, in which there is no bubble.
Right.
It's just harsh reality. And there's a line in the book, I think I say, where reality punched me in the face. And that really did happen that summer. I suddenly realized these guys were talking about things that I had absolutely no understanding of and no comprehension of, and couldn't possibly have that understanding at their level.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's just so fascinating, and as I talk to you, it makes me think sort of the author side of me, going back to something you said earlier, where you started in thrillers, which is where you felt comfortable, and I started in genre as well, and I think for me it was because it never occurred to me that I could write the great American novel. It just, that was for somebody else. That wasn't for someone who had grown up like I had. And and I wanted sort of on the job training, which is something you talk about in this book a lot too. And one of the things about writing genre is you learn this discipline. You learn how to tell a story. You learn the importance of pacing and dialogue. You understand how to, at least what reader expectation is and how to fill it. And I think that, excuse me, I think all of those things are so important. And then when you turn your attention to something that is more literary or more commercial, you still bring all of that skill with you. Only now, you're layering in a lot a lot more issues, a lot more, social commentary. You're allowed to sort of play in a bigger field. And I think that's something that's you really see in this book of yours. This idea that it's still a really fast, powerful read. I think it has an ending that people are going to love,
Mm.
and you're still teaching people along the way what it is you have to say from your own personal experience, both personally and sort of globally. And so I just say congratulations to that, because it is kind of a scary thing to do as an author. When you're selling very well doing something, it's always a little scary to step to the left and do something else.
It is, because when you step to the left, it means you're not writing the book on the right,
That's right.
and the book on the right is what's putting food on the table.
Hmm.
And so, you're taking a shot, you're taking a chance, and I've been very blessed that I have a publisher that allows me to do that, and Lake Union has really been very, very supportive of my doing that. Um, but it is terrifying. But it's terrifying anytime you sit down at a computer and you have a blank page and you realize you have to fill 400 of them. And it really takes that experience of, you know what, I've done this before and I will do it again. And, I don't write from an outline. I write sort of organically. And so I never fully understand what the book is about until I've written that first draft. And that's what I call my outline. My first draft, I call it my outline, and that sort of eases some of that tension, because as I'm writing it, I realize it's gonna change, and
Right.
things are gonna be different. And this book is a perfect example. The going back and adding in the journal. It not only added more substance to the book, but it changed the content of the book. It had to,
Yeah.
because I had to juxtapose certain things, like William's first experience with sex versus Vincent's first experience, and I needed to put that in so it wasn't just gratuitous, that there was a purpose for it, that there was an understanding to it. In both cases, it was something that was it was a moment that was stolen from them in some respects, something that they'll never be able to get back and share with someone that they truly love. But that's how it is for a lot of young people, and so I really wanted to make sure that those two stories had a purpose, that they meshed. One of the things you mentioned was sort of telling the story, but also having all these underlying themes. And the one underlying theme that has really resonated with a lot of the advanced readers and the reviewers and all those things is a line in which William says to Vincent, "Growing old is a privilege. It's not a right."
Yeah.
And you don't really fully understand that until you get older. And I lost my best friend at 42 years of age to a heart attack. Basically, his heart exploded. I'm losing a friend now at 65 years of age, and you begin to realize that life is fragile.
Hmm.
And think of how fragile it was for the men and women that fight in wars for us. I mean, literally, it's not a matter of years; it's a matter of seconds
Hmm.
where things can change. And that just had to be a truly horrific experience for all of them to go through. So it's something I think that we have to grow into, and begin to begin to really fully understand it.
I think that's true. Whenever you go to writers classes and everything, they always talk about finding your voice, as if it's sitting on the side of the road and you just got to pick it up, as you're working. And the truth is that you understand as you get older that your voice is not just the words on the page. Your voice is your view of the world
Yeah.
and what it is you have to say. And you're right that the older you get, um, the more you have to say, the more you've lived, the more experiences you've survived. And I think it does really allow us, if we're willing to go there, a much better opportunity to write a richer, deeper book. But I was going to ask you, so you kind of bring up process a little bit, which is something that your readers will probably want to know a little bit about. So you say you don't really do an outline. So I'm interested, sort of writer to writer, if you don't really know where you're going, how do you know, A, what the story, why this story? And what do you take with you in the beginning? What is your search?
So what I really, my search really is that character. You know, who is my protagonist, and why is he or she important? Why does he or she have a story? You know, what is their view of the world, and why is it important? You know, a good example is I'm working on another standalone novel now, and it's about a female attorney who comes from a family of Irish attorneys, but her father is a drunk, and he's been in practice for many years. He's a defense attorney. His daughter, his oldest daughter, has taken over the firm. His middle daughter is a mess because of growing up in that environment. And then the protagonist, Kira, she was so young, she never had to really deal with it until she got older and realized it. So what is her story? Well, it's already there. And now all I have to do is begin to put in sort of what is the legal drama that comes out of this. But I think books are about people and lives lived. I mean, we all grow up differently. We all don't live the same life. So for me, it's always about finding that character and then asking what you said. I thought, you know, so poignantly years ago to me, which is getting out of that character's way and understanding what that story is. I've had some instances where the story just, there's no story. And I've had to kind of go, okay, well, you know, it's an interesting character, but there's really no story here. And I don't do that lightly because I'm stubborn. You know, I'm stubborn, and I figure, no, there's got to be a story here. But sometimes there's just not. But really, what I love about this whole process is that exploration, that moment of finding out, oh my God, this is what the book is about.
Yeah.
You know, this is why I'm writing this book. Another really quick example is in The Last Agent, which is the follow-up to The Eighth Sister. There's a moment where Charles Jenkins goes to Viktor Fedorov's apartment, and Viktor Fedorov says, "Do you want to play chess?" And Jenkins doesn't really remember how to play. His grandfather taught him. He says, "Sure, I'll play you." And Victor just beats him badly. And then Jenkins begins to win a little more and a little more. But every time he gets close, Victor wins again. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm writing this, why am I writing this? What does this have to do with anything? But I stay in the process and I stay in the moment. And about 50 or 60 pages later, at a critical moment in the book where Victor has to make a decision whether he's going to do something or not, Jenkins basically hands him his money and says, you don't have to do this. Here's your money. Go away. And he's confused. Is like, why would you, but this isn't finished yet. Why are you giving me my money? And Jenkins says, because I know you'll do it. He says, well, how do you know that? And he says, because it's not about the money to you. It's about winning. And all of a sudden I went, that's what the chess scene was all about. And that's what Jenkins got from it. You know, he knew Victor would do it. So it's those moments where those aha moments where you just go, oh my Lord, that's why I'm writing this book. I just find them exhilarating. I mean, there's nothing better than watching your child be born and not knowing what the sex is, you know, and they come out and it's like, oh my God, it's a boy. Oh my God, it's a girl. And this does not equate on that level at all. But it's very much like that. It's that moment of birth where you go, oh, I know why I'm writing this book.
And, you know, it's always so interesting to me because I have a very similar process. And when I get to those moments, I realize that my subconscious had it all along.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of like getting out of my own way because I'm constantly trying to, you know, sort of push my way through to be in 100% control of this craft, which of course I am. I'm not schizophrenic, but there's this part of me that's worked it all out in my head. And I just have to, I think, be free enough and have the faith to write the scene that you don't know where it's going in furtherance of something that is coming that, you know, will put it all together for you.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. So I also wanted to sort of I see you say chess again, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the title for this. And I just want to say, by the way, I get, I don't know how many books come in the mail every day. And this one, The World Played Chess, is the first one that my husband picked up and said, "Hey, I want to read this book." So,
Well,
it's
tell him thank you.
a combination.
Well, it's a brilliant cover. It really is, and I can't thank my publishing team at Amazon enough. I'll have ideas for the cover, and they just go above and beyond. The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell. It's a cover that people pick up just for the cover.
Yeah.
And it's really beautiful. So The World Played Chess, I had this idea for this book, and I'd even, I think, started writing it. And I was down in Palm Springs visiting a friend and his wife. And we were, just kind of playing golf and relaxing a little bit. And he said, "What are you working on?" And I told him. And I said, "So here's what the book is, and here's what it's about." And he looked at me and he said, "So it's sort of like that saying, the world played chess." And I said, "What?" What saying? And he said, "The world played chess while I played checkers." And I sat there and I went, "Oh my Lord." I said, that's exactly what the book's about." And he said, I said, "Can I attribute that to you?" And he said, "Well, it's not mine. I don't know whose it is, but it's not mine." But then I looked it up, and it's unattributed. I mean, it exists, but
Oh,
they
really?
can't really say who it's attributed to. So I was gonna attribute it to Dale just for the hell of it, but then I found out I really couldn't do that. So, but it's from my buddy Dale, and I thought it was really brilliant, and I was really fortunate that Lake Union said, "Yeah, we're gonna keep it."
Yeah, and it is a beautiful cover that they've done. I really like the lettering, the photo. And it's interesting because it does, or it might appear to sort of skew male. And because people always think Vietnam War, that it's sort of a male dominated subject. But the truth is, I think because of the family dynamic and because of the characters and the journey they're on and the sort of, I want to say nostalgia, even though that isn't quite right, of the late 70s. I think it really speaks to a much broader audience, and I wondered if you have any thoughts on that.
I hope so. I guess is what I would say because I agree with you. I never set out to write a book for men or for women. People ask me all the time about how do I write from the perspective of a woman when I write the Tracy Crosswhite series, and my answer is I don't. I would never try to write from the perspective of a woman. I write from the perspective of a human being. I write from the perspective of somebody that has skeletons in her closet, who's just trying to live life, who's just trying to be the best parent she can be the best spouse that she can be the best detective she can be. And that's a universal trait for all of us. I mean, that's really what we all want. We all want to live a good life, raise our families, do our jobs, and that's universal. So The World Played Chess it's really not a book about Vietnam. It's a book about growing up and breaking away and finding your destiny. And that is true for so many, and it's not limited to gender. I mean, you talked about it, you touched on it earlier, where you said, you were in high school and you had different dreams than your friends in high school, and you just had different visions of what your life would be and what you wanted. And I was the same way. There was this nagging notion, if you will, in the back of my mind that that I wanted to do something. I wanted to. I don't want to say be somebody, but I wanted to make my mark. I really did. I wanted to make my mark. I started doing theater for that very reason, and I started doing theater in San Francisco, and I was doing equity shows, and it was probably some of the best times of my life. Because I met wonderful people, and you just you felt like you were making a mark, and that's really what the book is about. It's about It's about young people at that moment in their lives when, you know, they decide, you know, it's time for me to leave the nest. It's time for me to find my own destiny. It's time for me to be what I want to be. And, you know, I don't know how it was with you and your kids, but, you know, for me, I came to realize that my son is not me. My daughter is not me. They have different dreams, different aspirations, different desires, hopefully, you know, similar ethics and morals and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But it's not my life to live. It's their life to live. And I think that's one of the hardest things about being a parent is understanding that enough to say, okay,
Mhm.
it's time to let go, and it's time to let them be free. And that's really what this book is about. And the tragedy of it is that for so many young men and women, because especially nurses and all those things, that moment was taken from them.
Mhm.
You know, that moment was lost. They didn't get to make that choice. That choice was made for them, and their lives were irreparably changed forever.
Yeah. I mean, that is a great, I don't even know what to say. I mean, it's just so true, and it rings so true to me. And I think it really does. That really is what the book's about. I mean, you know, it's Vietnam, yes, but it really is that moment of manhood on one side and the moment of realizing that you have to let go on the other. Because the whole thing about parenting is you've been holding on for so long, and then suddenly you have to say, okay, you know, I hope everything I've taught you has landed somewhere, and you
Yeah.
know, off you go into the world. And then you get into, I think I'm a little farther along, but then you get into this journey of actually beginning to see your children as the adults that they're going to be.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, it's such a wonderful payoff for all of the sleepless nights and, you know, stress that came before. So you
Yeah.
told us a little bit about what's next, but do you have anything more about what's next for you?
Well, you know, I don't know how it was for you with
Mm.
COVID. You know, for me, it was you know, it was a horrific experience for so many people, and I have great empathy for them. I know many people that have suffered losses and you know, have issues and stuff. But for me, I work at home, and I would get up in the morning and I would go to my office, and suddenly I couldn't go anywhere.
Hmm.
I couldn't travel to conferences. I used to do probably 20 to 25 conferences a year. I would teach,
Wow.
you know, I had a couple conferences for week long, and suddenly I couldn't do anything. And all I could do was write. And a friend of mine, Sheldon Siegel, who's a writer, we were talking the other day, and we were talking about the books that we have coming out. And, you know, I went and I sort of looked at my pub dates. And since February of 2020 to February of 2022, I will have 6
Oh,
books and 1 short story come out.
so
I mean, I was like, okay, this is crazy. But you know, this is what I do. This is what you do, right? And you get up and you go to your desk. And when there was nothing else to do, and there literally was nothing else to do,
yeah.
I took great solace in writing and in getting out of the house in my head
Hmm.
and writing these books. Um, so this book will be out, you know, September 14th. It follows on the heels of uh, shoot my last In Her Tracks, which was the 8th Tracy book, and then a Amazon short story about Del Castigliano and Vic Fazio, who are Tracy's partners,
Oh,
will come out when they were rookies, and that short story will relate to the novel that will come out, which will be the 9th Tracy book called What She Found, and I believe that's out in February of 2022. And then in the interim, the 3rd book in the Charles Jenkins espionage trilogy, um, the Silent Sisters, will be out, I believe, in November. So several books,
Wow.
in the queue, ready to go and come out. And then I'm working on the new one. So it's it's been a lot. And you know how it is. You get this great idea and you sit down and you're writing it, and suddenly it's like, wait a minute, you got to do the developmental edits or the copy edits or you do this, right? The new book's coming out, and so you get the opportunity, these wonderful opportunities to talk to people and do Zoom conferences. I did 36 um, Zoom book clubs in about 9 months last year.
Wow.
And it was a thrill.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. These people were so gracious and so kind to have read my book, and then I get to go on and they tell me how much they loved it. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, and you don't have
Uh,
to be in airports or live out of a suitcase or be away from
yeah,
your family. All of that was really great because yeah, didn't I launch the Four Winds? Yeah, I launched the Four Winds without any travel. And so the same thing, we did a lot of Zoom and, talking to people. I wasn't nearly as productive as you were during COVID. I'm not generally as productive as you are, I don't think. Uh,
well, you have I know you have television and film
I
and
do.
a lot of those other things going on as well, which I'm sure also takes a great deal of your time. And congratulations, by the way. I mean, my wife is on pins and needles, and I am too, to see what they do and how they do, how they do with your books. I mean, that's always the big issue, right? What is it going to actually look like?
It's very
Um,
interesting, and the
yeah,
Nightingale, the filming has been put off because of COVID. So we're hoping to be filming in Budapest in April, and of course, I would love to go, but we'll see. The one thing I've learned about all of this, because you sort of dream of all of the film and all of the things, the ancillary parts of the business that seem really fun, and they are really fun, and it's all really exciting. um, but what I have really learned is I'm a novelist, and
yeah,
that's what I want to
yeah,
do. I mean,
yeah,
good luck to all of you. I like to sit and make up my own worlds and write my own books, and by the way, be completely in charge of what the final product is. I mean, I get
yeah,
lots of input from editorial or friends or whoever I have read it, but the bottom line is it's my book, it's my name, it is what I want it to be, as closely as I can, make it. And
yeah,
in all of our talk about getting older, one of the things I've learned in terms of the writing and the process for me in getting older is I need more downtime, which I never used to. I need a book to sit for a while before I edit it so that I can have less drive, so that I can be a little bit clearer and not quite so deadline oriented for me. Um, and that, I guess that's just part of getting older.
yeah. It's interesting. I've been able to narrate. I narrated Sam Hell, and I narrated a portion of The World Played Chess. I narrated Vincent's portion. William's portion is being done by just a fabulous actor who, ironically, is a first generation Vietnamese man.
Oh, really?
So
Wow.
it's fat, and he's got this brilliant New Jersey accent. He's not, he's just brilliant. So, I really love to do that. But I was asked a couple times when Sam Hell was sold and when the Charles Jenkins series was sold, if I'd be interested in writing the screenplay. And my answer was uncategorically no.
That's right.
And they were like, what, really? No. And I said, no. I said, if Bob Dugoni puts his name on a screenplay, the people in LA are going to go, who the hell is this? Right. I said, get me an A-list screenwriter to do it. But really, the real answer is what you said, which is, I think as we get older, we say to ourselves, okay, what is it that I do best?
Hmm.
That's what I'm going to focus on. And I'm like you, I'm a storyteller, and that's what I want to focus on, is telling stories the way that I want to tell the story. I don't want to get in a room
Right.
with 12 people and have them come up with ideas on how it's going to go. So, I agree with you 100%. I think you find what you do well and you do it, and you let other people do their jobs. And having said that, I'll say again, my copy editor, my developmental editor, Charlotte, she's fabulous. I mean, she's been with me on every book. And I can't say enough about her. Every once in a while, and this is a true story. She read one of the earlier drafts of this book, and I say that because I feel like it's always a process, and until it gets final, it's not the book. And she wrote me which I'm sure you've gotten, which are those 4 or 5 page letters about how you can make the book better. But really, what it came down to was she really asked the question, which was, why should we care?
That's good. That's great editorial.
And yeah, and you know what? That initial moment of I'm going to kill her,
Yeah.
And I said to myself, she's been right on 13 books I've written. She's probably right on this one. Let me go back and look at it. And it really was, what she was saying is, why does Vincent care?
Mm-hmm.
Why does he care? Why is he listening to these men? Why do these men have an impact on him? What is it about his being raised? I mean, that he cares, because if he cares, then the reader will care. Right. And it was just brilliant, really. And so I think, her name's Charlotte Hersher, and I just think she's brilliant. My copy editors, I let them do their job because they do it well. And I think all of us have to get past our own egos and get old enough to say, okay, this is what I do well. There are other people that do other things better than I do, and I'm going to let them do their job.
Oh, absolutely. And they make us look better. Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing you sort of learn the longer you're in this career, is it's really easy to get caught up in the flash and the dance and the bestseller lists and the covers and the things that a career isn't about. What your career is about and why people stay with you and why they follow you in new directions and why they continue following, characters, is the book itself. And so I'm always really sort of careful of my time, and I'm very careful that I'm always putting 95% of what I have into the book, which means I'm very bad at social media. I'm very bad at a lot of other things. But you can only sort of do what you do. And to come back to what you were saying earlier about this tough year, and I'm in the same boat in terms of having lost a really close friend who was 65 this year. I have another friend who's recently been diagnosed with cancer. And so I'm getting to this age where I just really realize how important every moment is. And I'm very protective of my friends, my family, my work, and sort of focusing in on what I choose to spend my time on.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. And I have several years ago, I had made this deal with myself where I was going to say yes to everything. In terms of, if somebody said, do you want to go fishing? I'd say yes. If somebody said, do you want to golf on Monday? I'd say yes. Do you want to do, because there are a million reasons why we can say no.
Yeah.
And a million reasons we can talk ourselves out of things. And I recently started doing that again. And it's been really terrific. It's been really a wonderful way to live life, and to try to live life to the fullest, because we're all going to reach that point where we can't say yes. And so I think it's important that you say yes while you can.
Oh, well, that was really great, Bob. And again, thank you so much for inviting me to join you for this conversation about your fabulous book, The World Played Chess. I've had a really great time, and I want to thank everybody who joined us and remind them that they can get your book on September 14th or pre-order it on Amazon today if they want to. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Really, I mean it with all sincerity. It was really an honor to be interviewed by you. I'm fully aware of the success of your novels and the movies and the films and everything else. And we share the same agent, and she has nothing but superlatives when she talks about you, and they were all true. So thank you very much. It was really an honor, and I'm very, very grateful.
Well, thank you. Hey, we live in practically the same town. We should have a glass of wine someday.
Yeah, you would think, right? That would be great. I'd look forward to it.
All right, take care.